All right, hello, and hey guys, hey everyone. Welcome to the Collaboration in Isolation, the Remote Writers Room panel, put on here today by the guys from ACTA and the gang from Jungle. Welcome to everybody who's kind of listening in from wherever you are during isolation. We've assembled a top panel for you guys. Here we have today Oscar-nominated producer and award-winning filmmaker Chelsea Winstanley. You'll see her on the screens. We've got acclaimed, she's worked on JOJO Rabbit, What We Do in the Shadows, Night Raiders. We've got acclaimed Australian writer, director and Jungle partner Trent O'Donnell, who is famous for No Activity, The Good Place, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. We've got award-winning New Zealand actress, writer and director Madeline Sami from the BREAKER UPPERER'S, What We Do in the Shadows, Super City. We've got renowned New Zealand filmmaker and performer Jackie Van Beek, also involved in the BREAKER UPPERER'S, Wellington Paranormal, What We Do in the Shadows. We also have AFI and ACTA Award-nominated screenwriter Alice Bell, who's worked on Suburban Mayhem, The Beautiful Lie, The Slap. And we have the head of content, former gun for hire and head of content at Every Cloud Productions, an experienced development producer, story editor and writer, Mike Jones, who's known for fucking Adelaide, the Kettering incident, and the gloaming, among other things. And I'm Christiaan Van Vuuren. I'm just basically here to ask questions and talk to people. I'm a writer and director myself, and have found this whole period very interesting, and we're keen to find out from other people around the place how they've been managing to get through the new restrictions put on us and the new challenges, I suppose, in the landscape in order to be able to continue their work, collaborate and keep stuff moving whilst in isolation. So I think we should just talk briefly to start with just about writers' rooms in general and what we love about them. And I might start with you, Madeline, if that's all right. Just kind of, let us know what it is that you love about writers' rooms in general and that kind of process.
Well, I mean, as you could have heard from the bios of the New Zealand gals that you just read off, we all often get involved in each other's projects in New Zealand, and collaboration is a really big part of what we do, and particularly for Jackie and I, we do a lot of work together. So writers' rooms are a big part of our process here, at least for me and myself and Jackie, and I'm sure Chelsea as well. Like we have a very active, like collaborative kind of way of working, and it's been really interesting in lockdown, particularly for Jackie and I, adapting to the new normal of this sort of Zoom writers' room, I guess, and the kind of limitations of that, or the just kind of different way of doing that sort of thing, because there's nothing quite like actually physically being in the room with a group of people and inspiring each other in person with your own, and being kind of energized by being physically closer to each other. It's been a real learning curve in the lockdown that we've had here, just to kind of adapt to finding a new way of having that experience without actually physically feeding off the energy of your collaborators, I guess.
And have you still found that you're able to bounce off each other in the same kind of way, despite not being physically in the same space? Or what's the challenges been around that?
The challenges, it's been interesting because, we write from home a lot, there's a lot, but I think, it's been sort of a challenge of kind of working out what's different for a bit and why it feels different and how you can make it better. And then there's having your family and I can literally hear my daughter and my wife singing in the room next door right now. And it's that thing of the distractions of home life and trying to kind of stay focused. I think being as focused and getting as much out of a Zoom call as you might out of a writing room has been interesting.
I've got a 3 and a 5-year-old, and I've been writing at home with my 3 and 5-year-old kind of climbing all over me and running around me in circles. And I was I was saying the other day, it's kind of like doing sprint training whilst wearing a suit made of weights. And then once you actually get some free time where you don't have them climbing all over you, it feels like you've shed the suit and you can just sprint, and you're just that much more productive and focused. And
I've had to do a couple of all-nighters to get the focus and to have the time to myself. Not all-nighters, come on. I've stayed up till like 2 a.m, but I've had to kind of find the time to where it's quiet, basically, in my brain and in my house to concentrate and focus. Yeah.
And Jackie, going to you now because of the work that you guys do together. Obviously, the normal thing within a writer's room is that someone's in control of the whiteboard, or someone's doing the plotting on the wall, and you're kind of beating out all your bits and pieces for your story. How have you guys managed that in a remote setting? Have you guys kind of used things like Google Docs to share a document in front of you between your computers? Has one of you taken whiteboard duties in the room? How have you guys managed that?
Yeah, it's been interesting because normally, as Madeline said, her and I, we have our own little writers' room, and then we go into bigger writers' rooms when we need other people. But Madeline and I have our little writers' room, and normally, as she said, we'll work together a lot in the same room, which involves a lot of just like hanging out and drinking coffee, and then then trying to do the sprint. Okay, we do like 9 pages, we can have a wine together, so it's been quite different. So it's like you can't really do that, so if we're writing a screenplay at the moment, and so we kind of divided it up and we passed the scripts between us. So I had the script for the first week, and I also just found it so hard because my brain was so kind of foggy at kind of trying to compute the whole, like, oh my gosh, we're in lockdown, I've got 3 kids. So I spent the first week, I was hoping to write the first 30 pages do the 30 pages of the rewrite for Madeline. But what I did is I just spent a whole week just like cutting up little pieces of like colored card and like sticking them up on my wall, and like writing it all out. And that's all I could kind of do for that first week of lockdown, because just like play with like colors and shapes like a 3-year-old. And pretty much then I actually rang Madeline and said, I think I've just got to pass the script to you. Like, I'll take a photo of this, and I've done a little bit of writing and I've structured the draft. So I went through and structured the draft, like, and, in red I wrote, I did lots of cutting and pasting, but I couldn't actually bring myself to do any writing. And I rang Madeline and said, I actually think I'm going to get depressed. I'm feeling really weird.
I was going to say, I think your actual words were, and I could hear the tone in your voice. No, Madeline, you have to take the script now. I may get depressed. And I was like, I got it. I got you, girl. Don't worry.
I mean, that sounds like a beautiful collaboration that you two can tell each other, hey, I've just got so much head noise going on that I can't actually handle this right now. Can you please take that off me?
Yeah, it's been crucial, actually. It's been really crucial so Madeline and I have kind of passed it. We've tried to do like a week, which has sometimes gone into 10 days, separately. And we chat like every day, about things that come up in the script or different ideas. But it's been crucial to be able to say to the other person, hey, I'm feeling like I'm in a pretty weird headspace, or I'm feeling pretty fatigued, or like my kids need to see me now, like they can't just see a closed door anymore, or I just need to like not think about it. And then the other person will just jump in, mainly for men. Like, we've just been navigating mental health and energy levels pretty much.
And so what have you had any strategies? Because I found the same thing. It's quite intense, just the head noise and the amount of exposure we have to this story. And this, I mean, there's probably 1 million screenplays being written now that are single location pandemic screenplays out there.
With a lot of mental health kind of issues, I've probably riddled through them as well,
Exactly, yeah. And have you had any strategies to help you clear that pipeline, to help you write? Anything like meditation or trying to, exercises, anything like that?
Yeah, what I've done is I've tried to kind of stick to a kind of routine, like, and especially, and my husband and I are also trying to provide routines for the 3 kids at home, who are getting kind of more and more grouchy, being lumped with their parents the whole time. But try to stick with a routine. So like getting up quite early, 6:30, getting up, chilling out with the kids, getting everyone breakfast, and then kind of trying to do some writing, like a chunk of writing. And then the incentive of the coffee, and then the exercise with the dog after the school day finishes, calling Madeline when I'm feeling a bit weird. But yeah, really trying to stick with a routine, and then like dinner, making sure that I have a wine and having a nice time, do something nice, like play Scrabble or do some bit more writing. But just the routine, I think, because the thing that's really affected my writing and my focus is that I'm I'm so usually an out and about person, and I get a lot of stimulus and a lot of inspiration by seeing people and zapping around town and driving around and listening to music, and then just being at home, I'm like, I don't feel like a creative person anymore. I don't even know if and then like Madeline and I'll be like, what's the even point of writing a screenplay? I mean, people are dying, like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And kind of getting to that, and then having to go, no, I just need to do 8 more pages tomorrow and tick it off,
Find yourself getting a bit Gollum, don't you? How you kind of like, no, you have to be productive and you have to get work done, but the world is burning and nothing's important anymore. Like, what's the point of anything? But now you still need to forge yourself. Yeah.
But it's a rom-com. Rom-coms are important.
Okay, Chelsea, might throw to you now and just say, Chelsea, how do you think our industry is positioned in terms of our ability to cope with the challenges of this kind of COVID era, and I guess whatever comes next?
Kia ora koutou. Well, I guess creative industries are just that, they're creative. So you just have to be prepared to pivot. That's become my favorite word.
Yeah.
Can I pivot? Yes, I can. Can I pivot? Yes, I can. De la Soul, all the way. But you have to, I think we're just poised to do it anyway. We're creative people. You have to literally look at what you've got on your slate. I mean, I'm even looking now at a couple of productions that were meant to be filming overseas, and I know that's not going to be happening anytime soon. Australia and New Zealand are going to be probably opening up before anybody. So what does that look like? Can I, as a producer, pivot those projects and bring them back home? Is it my secret little weapon to get myself home? Maybe, and away from this crazy place where an orange guy is just out of control. I don't know. Like, I think we're really good.
You're in the US, aren't you? Are you located in the US at the moment? Is that where you are?
Yes. Yeah. I'm stuck in La La Land. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeez.
Trying to find my way out. Help me. No. I think, in Kiwis and Aussies, we're super creative, and I think we will just make it happen. I mean, the other big thing too is trying to figure out, even if you're going to go into production, what does it even look like on a set now? Like, we're touching stuff all the time, scripts and touching each other and, makeup, whatever, all that. But now we're going to have to be, like putting makeup on with single application, disposable things. How do we weigh that up with the environmental issues of that? We need to think about, are we going to get back into smaller crews? Is it now, I mean, imagine how many documentaries are going to kind of come out of this, because it's a perfect way to pivot. You can make a documentary with like 3 people. Yeah. You could make an entire film with just archives. You don't even have to touch nothing. You can touch your computer screen and have a tutu with some digital files, So I think there's going to be some great creative action come out of both our territories, and maybe there'll be more, because we're going to open up our borders probably more, Aussie and New Zealand. Maybe there'll be an opportunity for us to do more co-productions. We can really actually think about doing that more, because we haven't done a lot of that in the past, and I think we should.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the other day, like if you take Australia and New Zealand, and if you kind of look at that as a production landscape, there's not many places in the world that we couldn't emulate with our landscapes that we have across those 2 countries. Like, if it takes a long time for the United States and the UK and other areas of the world to open up, do you think there's possibly a future where people start kind of, setting shows for their own markets, but actually shooting them in Australia and New Zealand and pretending that's, that Sydney's New York and that, Norway is somewhere in the countryside of New Zealand? What do you think?
Yeah, of course. And then there's new technology being developed all the time. Like the stuff they did on The Mandalorian, that TV series, that's incredible. You could literally, I walked onto set one day and you think that you're in a set that's been built, but it was just literally screens, and just, you could project anything. You could be anywhere in the world. So you could literally create any space and be anywhere. I suppose the danger in Aussie and New Zealand opening up is that there'd be a bottleneck of everyone trying to come down there. So, everyone be with their spears like, get out. It's local only first.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you've already been thinking about like some projects that you have in the pipeline that you're trying to kind of pivot and evolve and change to make sense in this kind of current landscape.
Yeah, I am. I do. I've got one in particular that I am in. And actually, in terms of the writer's room thing, I'm in the process of approaching some Indigenous writers in Australia, because I've got a TV series that I want to start getting up and going. And I'm excited about that, because it'll be my first trans-Tasman, through the Zoom, through the whatever application we use. And I mean, it's great because it means that we don't literally have to fly over and spend all this money on expense in the development phase. We can do that with each other just like this and, you know, have a conversation, get things going. But I'm excited to work with definitely my Aboriginal brothers and sisters on creating something that really we should be doing more of. Like Indigenous co-productions is such an untapped space for us.
I mean, taking that point you just said, it's very much, in some ways, although it's put all these restrictions on us in terms of putting us in one space, in many ways the world's actually just got a little bit smaller because there's no difference. You know, for us previously, if you wanted to get some big American writer or some, you know, big UK writer or someone from New Zealand or anywhere, you kind of had to fly them out, put them up, put them in the writer's room. I mean, none of that stuff can happen now. So there's probably more opportunity to collaborate with people who have different points of views, different stories, different angles on thing. And, you know, also people whose work you just admire from across the sea somewhere. Would you say there's probably even, this situation has created even more opportunity to collaborate in some senses?
Yeah, because that's an expense. Of course, you got to try and come up with the money for that kind of thing to happen. And then there's also these gatekeepers, you know, within this mix of this world here that you have to try and overstep. So maybe you can get in another way, and this digital environment and all sorts of ways that you can contact people. Maybe you can do a bit of sidestepping. You don't necessarily have to go through these gatekeepers anymore. I think it's actually exciting, and I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Yeah, we're all trying to stay positive. I think, you know, Mike Jones, would you say that part of the way that we've always worked in Australia and New Zealand, and that kind of, I suppose, the hustle to get things made that we've all had, we all know that it's not easy to get a show up or get a film up or get anything like that. So we have a certain amount of hustle that helps us generate work. Would you say that quality we all have is part of what's, I suppose, going to help us get through all this? And like Chelsea's saying, pivot?
Yeah, I think what we were saying before about we're inherently creative people. So what we do is we pivot and we're flexible. And this has been a long-standing process. If you think back to in the last decade, people talking about like gig economy. I'm like, well, fucking, we've been doing that for years. This idea of moving from job to job and insecure incomes, but you hustle and you make it happen. And I think what happens once we enter a kind of lockdown online environment, we actually ask wider questions about who we want to work with. And on one end, it's who's the big name star who's sitting on their ass at the moment, who we could probably get because they're not doing anything else. At the same time, we're also asking, well, where are those other voices who I haven't had a conversation with? And I think questions start to get wider. And I think that's happening at a number of levels, certainly as someone who's setting up a company looking for new IP and new stories and new talent to work with. I'm having conversations now I might not have reached for before, because we get to put a pause, brakes on a few things, think more flexibly about what we want to do a year from now, 2 years from now, and start to reach a little wider than the kind of freight train hustle that we have going on a lot of the times. And I think in many other ways, that's landing quite particularly on the idea that there's going to be an opportunity at the end of this. And I'm a bit of an optimist at the best of times, but I think there's a boom coming for the simple reason that there's a whole lot of networks that are going to be so fucking desperate for content when this is over, that there's going to be windows to get stuff up that you might not have got up before or might not have been able to put the resources in. So when that happens, and I think dead right, that Australia and New Zealand are going to come out of this able to shoot, put crews on the ground before certainly the US and UK. I think that's almost a given, the rates of infection and so on, and the way our respective governments have handled it considerably better than the rest of the world, it seems. That ability to get boots on the ground and start making things is going to be a real opportunity we can exploit, but it relies on us having done the legwork now to find those good, fresh ideas that networks are going to be hungry for. And that's a other kind of hustle. It's looking for that fresh stuff.
And so do you think it's kind of sounds like what you're saying is this is almost like an enforced development period for a lot of people, because
it really is
kind of being held back. It's, you know, that is another thing in Australia. I guess I assume in New Zealand too, that they'd have similar challenges, is obviously we're not as well funded as the United States and the UK to do really extended development periods and just to, you know, keep working on the scripts. There hits a point where people need to eat and they just need to make the thing that they've been working on. But, you know, maybe this is, I don't know, do you think maybe this is a bit of a chance for us to spend a bit more time further developing those projects, taking them to the next level so that when things open up, they're just ready to go? Yeah,
look, in the case of Evercloud, we had two shows that are on pause that were, you know, ready to shoot and then we're just waiting. And as soon as we open up, we can roll them out. But that meant, well, what do we do now? We can do two things. One, we can put more time into those scripts, more time into that process that was in train, and now we've got some extra hours and extra time. But the other is I'm casting wide, going, okay, well, we're not going to be in production when we thought. I'm not going to have to do these things. So what can I do now to make sure we're still as a company productive? And in many ways, feeling an obligation that we need to generate work as a company that has a certain scale that can keep running through a downtime where a lot of our freelancers can't and smaller companies can't. I feel a sort of sense of obligation to keep work ticking over and to keep ideas flowing. So it is a kind of forced development. But it's I think the big change, the really big change is what are people going to want to watch on the other side of this pandemic? And I started in this job in January, having one set of conversations around the strategy of what we wanted to make over the next couple of years. And then this happened. And it's like those conversations went out the window and we start again. Okay, what we thought people were going to want to watch, I think is very different now. And I'm reflecting on things like in the Second World War, there's a rush for musicals. People sort of crave the escapism of that. What impact does that have on the kinds of TV drama or feature films? What kinds of genres? What kind of emotional experiences the audience looking for? And that feels like a great reset where we're kind of on a chain with the same old, same old. This feels like
a return to musicals. I genuinely think that would be
and all kinds of other escapism. And that's the big question. I'm loving asking that question of what an audience is going to want to watch on the other side of this. And it feels like that's an opportunity to tell kinds of stories that we haven't been able to tell, or tell them from points of view we haven't been able to tell before, that audiences will be hungry for.
Let's take that. Alice, as someone who's spent a lot of time writing, working across a lot of things, what do you think people are going to be kind of looking for on the other side of this?
I think they're going to be looking for well-ventilated dramas.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I feel like we're going to be looking for stuff that connects us. I feel like coming out of something that feels dark, and I do agree with you, Christiaan, like the mental load feels big. Yeah. So I think when we come out of this, I don't know if we're going to be so interested in like the very, very dark. I feel like we're going to be looking for things that are bringing us together. We probably want to see some outside scapes. So New Zealand is amazing for that. Yeah, I think
we need some fresh air, won't we? Really, for our eyeballs.
We're going to want air.
Yeah. And what do you think? Again, as someone who's worked in a lot of writers' rooms, spent a lot of time in there, what kind of advantages do you think that a remote writers' room has over a physical one? If we're trying to look at the silver lining of this development.
Well, I mean, I'm an interesting case because I was in an American writers' room when this happened, and I was in LA on The Expatriates for Amazon, and the world kind of imploded, and I ended up evacuating back to Australia with my kids. So we were halfway through, and we're still going, and we're still in the room, but it has changed a lot in that, you have to take it on. It has to evolve with the situation. So our rooms right now, it's less. We're not in there as much, but I think you can really make it work if you're very specific about what you're talking about when you're in the room. Like don't just get in the room to think about what you're going to think about today. Like be very targeted about. We're going to talk about this character. We're going to talk about this particular in this episode, rather than a kind of blanket. But I think overall I feel like it's giving us extra tools, and it feels like this whole other thing that we can use, because I feel right now I'm much more our writers are much more accessible in a way, because you can be writing and then you can be like, hey, can we call a room in 20 minutes to talk through this, which you can't do when you're in an actual physical writer's room. Yeah.
With international time zones, you having to kind of get up at 2 a.m. and jump on like international time is my Achilles heel, so I have no idea what we are versus the United States. Is there some more?
Well, no, we're not doing that so much. I mean, they're starting later and I'm starting earlier. So I get up and we usually jump on about 8. I'm with Lulu Wong, who's my partner. So usually she and I meet early, and then we chat through like what we're going to do. And then we'll bring in, we're sort of just very specific about the room. Like, do we want everyone? Do we want, we kind of mix it up, which is also another kind of benefit to having an online room, is just you could be really creative with how you're going to run it and who's going to be there. And
because sometimes 6 people in a room is really handy on a particular day, and then the next day when you're just trying to like push a character a little further, you only need 2 or 3 people to kind of throw that around, or the people who specifically are adding value to those characters you might have,
Yeah, totally. And I think it's given us also, especially for Lulu and I, riding together. You know, like you can just leave the Zoom, we can be riding and we can be talking and we can be sort of in and out of each other's lives much more than we would when we're living in the same city. So that's been really interesting.
Yeah, so in many ways,
Opened the door a little.
yeah, in many ways, I suppose, particularly for us, you know, being on a couple of islands on the other side of the world, I suppose for us, it's maybe actually become in some ways a bit easier to tap into, you know, different creatives, different people, more diverse.
Yeah. And I think across this, it does feel like as an Australian, we're very far away, but this has felt like a real leveler. And it was funny when I left, you know, I felt like my manager and people were a little bit like, well, like you're so far away. And as it's gone on, they're like, oh, this isn't that bad. Like you feel like you're just there anyway. It's not like we see each other face to face when we're in the same city that much anyway. So, you know, once you get your head around the time zones. And it's been funny for Lulu and I because we have this 24-hour working day, whereas I get up and it's 3 o'clock for her. So she's been working all day. She tells me what she's been doing. We sort of swap and then baton pass to me. And then I'm working basically through her night until she gets up. So it's kind of funny in that way. We're like a machine that just goes around and around.
Yeah, just a creative robot.
We're a creative robot.
We're all having to go slap that part of the thing.
Yeah. So I think there's definitely things that we will take post-COVID. You know, I mean, you wouldn't choose to be, I mean, obviously being in a writer's room is great. I mean, it's such a privilege. It's an amazing kind of place to work. And being together is, you know, is more beneficial than being apart. But I do think there'll be certain things. Like you said, you can bring people in for a day that aren't in you know, you don't have to put them up and put them in a hotel and fly them out. You can actually have them. We're all getting much more used to this format.
And I suppose those people with a really specific skill set, you know, you might, you know, if you're making a cop drama, you might want to have a cop in the room, but they can have some like weirdo former murder detective who's like going to destroy the energy of the room every other day, except for that 2 hours you need them to talk about process. And you can kind of just go, hey, can we just loop that person in for 2 hours of process chat and then they're gone again and you don't have to.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think just overall, we're all just getting used to this whole other format of communicating. We're getting better at it. I really enjoyed the first Zoom kind of mess ups in the first week when this all happened. And there's, you know, people's kids or partners walking around naked in the background, like all of those, it felt like as the world was getting used to this technology, it was really funny.
Turned us all into boomers overnight.
Yeah, totally.
I really like what you said about it being a great leveler. And I wonder, you know, that thing about it, it really has leveled the entire market. And, you know, it's always been different for us as Australian New Zealanders. You know, if we want to go pitch an idea in the US, development's one thing, the writer's room's one thing. I know that's what we're talking about mostly. But I think, you know, maybe throwing to Trent here. Trent, do you think that this has kind of leveled the playing field for Aussies and Kiwis who have got an idea to pitch, that, you know, if the execs in the United States and the UK are kind of having the Zoom meeting with people from their own cities, does that kind of give them the advantage of not having to drop 10 grand to fly over there and, you know, it not being more difficult than any other pitch?
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, certainly, if nothing else, they're very used to having Zoom pitches now and taking a Zoom pitch. So that's like, I think that would have been weird probably a year ago, and it would have, like, if you couldn't get everyone in the room, you just would have like postponed it for a while. But now that they're so, you know, executives are very used to the idea of a Zoom pitch. I do think though that it's still kind of like the pitching over Zoom is still an art unto itself. It's still being figured out. I think speaking to some executive friends, they're having some long, hard days, like hearing back to back Zoom pitches for, you know, all sorts of reasons. It's breaking up and all that kind of stuff. But definitely, you know, and definitely with the allure of like Australia and New Zealand in production terms, I think it's a great time to be in Australia and pitching something internationally.
And what do you, what other opportunities do you think will come out of this period for us kind of creatively as an industry?
I mean, I think at the moment I'm feeling like people are trying to like guess what's going to happen and looking for a certain production model that people will, rightly or wrongly, assume is going to be the type of thing that shoots first when we do get out of this. So I know that like the room I'm doing at the moment with Patty, we're doing season 4 of No Activity, and we got commissioned for a 4th season during this. So yeah, it's because it's such a contained show.
That's always been in self-ISO, that show.
I know. Every season we have some weird thing that manages to like save it at the last minute. We'll get like a random celebrity will tweet about it and say they'll be in it, and they'll go, yeah, okay, we'll go again. And this time we had a global pandemic where it was like, it's people in cars, yeah, we could probably do that. And so yeah.
And so are you working on other projects or developing other projects that I suppose have in any way been inspired by what has happened here? Or is it more like you're saying where you're just kind of thinking, you know, hedging your own bets on how the industry will come together on the backside of this?
Yeah, honestly, I've been developing and writing stuff, but it's mostly stuff that, you know, I should have finished by now, and I'm taking the opportunity more so than like, I don't know, like it's going to be a tough one in terms of to predict the tone when we come out of this. You know, invariably there'll probably be some like kind of like some not great stuff before great work sort of does encapsulate this whole time and period in kind of a nice and rewarding way. So I'm not like yeah, particularly in America, I'm not exactly sure how the dust is going to settle on it, and whether I'm certainly not looking to do a pandemic bit at the moment.
Yeah, no, I've got a feeling there'll be a little bit of corona fatigue, not just from obviously the head cloud that we've all experienced as people, and the fact that there's a kind of 24-hour just running ticker tape of news stories of what this disease is doing to the world. I think that so many people are going to kind of take that and make something really, I suppose, be inspired in a really kind of on the nose, obvious way about that process. Yeah,
probably. I mean, who knows? There's going to be some, yeah, I always find with these things, with this kind of seismic event, someone's going to have a brilliant takeover that we didn't see coming.
Yeah.
But yeah, there'll probably be some missteps along the way.
Are you in the US or Australia at the moment?
I'm in America at the moment. Yeah, I'm still in LA. I didn't get out. Alice just left without much warning, so we're still here. We're stuck.
And so, what are you thinking in terms of if you think, knowing, you know, from the connections you have back home and the people you work with back home, are you feeling like Australia and New Zealand are in a kind of I suppose beneficial position with regards to the way that we've managed to kind of contain this thing on our side of the oceans? How are you thinking we're positioned to come out of this as an industry?
I think really well. Like people, I've had conversations, and I'm sure lots of people have, lots of Australians and Kiwis in LA, I'm sure, are having conversations where executives and production people are getting excited by the of potentially being able to shoot home first. So it feels like at the moment that we're really well placed to kind of to you know, I guess take advantage of this kind of weird time.
And Chelsea, coming back to you, Chelsea, you talked about that you're kind of currently reaching out to writers, Indigenous writers in Australia that you want to have involved in a project you're doing. I mean, for any other writers or people who are watching the chat today, what kind of advice have you got for them about, you know, practical ways to be able to connect with creatives from overseas and people they might be interested in working with?
You know, we're lucky. New Zealand and Australia, we have these wonderful government organizations that want to support artists. Here in America, you don't have that. It's either big studio systems or you're trying to do indie styles with nothing. So we both have governments that are trying really hard right now to add money into development opportunities. I mean, the great thing is none of them are being able to go to Cannes or these markets, so they've got actually some surplus of money they can throw at development. So they can put money into, they're not going to take it away from any other places, they're just kind of redistributing that money. So it's a good opportunity if you are a writer to be just bold and brave enough to, you know, if you don't want to contact a producer per se, contact your Screen Australia, contact the Film Commission and let them know that you've got something that's really worth, you know, making or investing in. Don't be afraid. I think the great thing about this time has been, you know, introspective and having a go. Just like, if you've thought of something that you've wanted to do, no one's watching. Just have a go. Like, just, even if it sucks, it doesn't matter, because you're literally not, you know, we're not in that room where we have to try and sell ourselves. Like, you can literally just try and have a go at writing or whatever it is that you might want to have, you know, try for the first time. So I don't know. I think it's, yeah, we're lucky. We have opportunities. We can, there's money there for us. We are lucky in terms of, you know, living in Australia and New Zealand. So take advantage of that. Don't be afraid to reach out and get in touch with the commissioners that you've got in your own country. I mean, even Australia, you've got regional money too. You've got way more money than us. We're coming for your money.
Well, we're coming for your Prime Minister. So, you know, there you
go.
I really like that attitude of just kind of have a crack, you know, that like have a crack at something while you have an opportunity to have a crack, because I think, you know, a lot of people, you hear about, you know, Shakespeare wrote King Lear while he was isolated, and you hear about these like incredible artworks that were painted while people were isolated with consumption in the 1700s and whatever else. And I know personally, I've put a lot of pressure on myself to be productive and get a lot of stuff done during this time, despite the challenges of, you know, having to also be a full-time carer and be, you know, homeschooling and balancing the work with your partner and all those sorts of things. Madeline, have you had any ways of, I suppose, what are the pressures you've been putting on yourself across this period, and how have you kind of helped alleviate those or help kind of keep things light for your creative headspace?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mental health thing has been something to be super aware of. You know, I had a week where, well, I had a Monday actually where I'd convinced myself that I had COVID somehow.
I've been there.
What's that? What we got there in the background?
Oh, yeah. Oh, we got a special guest who's joined us now.
Oh.
Because we have been talking a lot about how you can connect with other places and how the borders have all got smaller. And we happen to have a horse named Paris who's joined us on the panel. Mostly just kind of, I suppose, as an example of the types of things you can do to make writers' rooms a little bit weirder or more interesting.
I'm going to look up Paris's IMDb just to see.
Have we got Paris? Hello, Paris.
Check out Paris's IMDb.
Hi,
and see
Paris.
what sort of stuff she's been up to.
Paris has come in from Chesley Farm, I believe it is.
Ah.
Paris is the tallest horse on the Chesley homestead in Sofala, a regional town in New South Wales. Paris was a failed racehorse, but has now been repurposed as a riding horse. I think there's a writing horse.
A writing horse.
A writing horse.
Wow,
exactly.
That's amazing.
But you know, I've possibly that interesting fact about Paris could be a good opportunity. I suppose. Sorry, I jumped to Paris whilst you were still answering my question.
I mean, Paris really just, she deserves the attention for sure.
No, I actually, I'm genuinely, I would love you to continue along your line of thought, and then I will. I can't
remember anymore. I'm just staring into the beautiful eyes of that beautiful horse.
Okay.
No. For me, yeah. I mean, I convinced myself I had COVID-19 one day. That was a big week. You know, I'd been to drop some food off to my mum the day before. It's because we've never been through anything like this in our lifetime. The kind of challenges of mentally have sort of snuck up on me a little bit. It's been things like one day reading the newspaper too much, and then trying to sit and write, as Jackie was saying, a rom-com, and just kind of balancing all those thoughts in my head. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of the same thing as Jackie, really, just getting into a routine, exercising every day, just trying to try not to put too much pressure on myself in terms of output. If you don't feel like doing something someday, you know, just play with your kid, be present, don't feel this, you know, there's this hangover from the way the world was, which is to overwork yourself, to keep putting content out, to keep creating, you know, and it's put a bit of a pause on this whole pandemic for me, and it's made me philosophical about, you know, the way the world was and was, you know, and I think it's made a lot of people think about that sort of stuff, and it wasn't working, you know, the world wasn't working in many ways, and so how that sort of seeps into what you do creatively and how you work creatively as well, and just life balance. You know, I went, and we've dropped down to alert level 3 in New Zealand, which means we've got a bit more freedom to move around. And I did, on the first day of alert level 3, I did a presenting job, but there are lots of restrictions around it. I had to turn up at a studio, the door would be open, I had my own bathroom, the camera was set up, I just had to sit in a chair, present the job, and then walk out, you know. And it was a real window into kind of like, I don't know what the world might be like, but it was a super stressful thing to do as well, you know. And I came home and I was exhausted because I was just like, it felt dangerous driving, you know, into the city in Auckland. It felt like a really intense thing to do. Just that was enough to kind of make me feel like I need to sleep all afternoon. So yeah, I think it's just about managing your own expectations and not doing too much if you don't feel like it. Yeah,
I love that. Alice, if you were to leave kind of like aspiring writers and you know, producers and people developing stuff throughout this period, if you could leave them with any advice of your own, what would that be?
It just feels like, as we keep talking about it, just feels like this creative reckoning. So I guess my advice would be just go with it and just let yourself think the things that you're thinking, you know, like who do I want to be, like who do I want to work with? For some of it, it's like, where do I want to live? Like, what do I want to write about? Just allow yourself to go into those spaces, because I think it is a change. Like, it's a big change for all of us. And I guess the last thing I might say too is just be kind on yourself and on others, because it is coming out in strange ways sometimes. And, you know, like, you can be at work, or you can be with your family, or you can be wherever, and people do odd things. And then you've got to just sort of remember that it just comes out. And so you've got to treat yourself with the same kind of, just allow yourself to kind of live it. Because sometimes it does build up and you feel this thing and you're not really sure what it is. And it's COVID, you know, it's a weird situation, and you tell yourself it's all fine and it's normal, and, you know, you work on your writer's room and you're writing scripts, and it sort of resembles normal life, but it's not normal. So I think, I think you've just got to make it work at where we are, and just be kind to yourself and keep writing, because it is an opportunity. It feels definitely like an opportunity.
It's interesting because, you know, I remember when I first started out writing, you read in all the books, write what you know type thing. And when you first start out, you take that really kind of like quite obviously, like you go, oh, well, I know what it is to be a writer, so I will write about what it is to be a writer. Or I know, you know, I used to work at a gym, I'll write about working at a gym. But there's, you know, as the more you do, the more you start to realize, like, oh, that's really about like the emotional experiences you're having.
Yeah. It's more like write what you feel, isn't it?
Yeah. And it sounds like a lot of what you say sounds like this is going to kind of have profound impacts on our creative work and our development that we might not fully understand yet, but that's going to be the result of whatever this kind of collective emotional experience we're going through has been.
Yeah, I think that's right. Be ready for when we all come out into this new world, because it does feel like as close to a reckoning as we might have in our lifetime. We don't know, unless there's some other COVID. But but you know, it just feels like it's an unusual situation. And I feel like just before we entered this, it felt like the world was at a cracking pace, you know. Like, I remember having a conversation with my girlfriends one night, just saying, I feel like I'm running and I'm constantly running, but I don't know where I'm running to. And everyone was like, yes, I'm just tired because I'm just running. And now we were kind of running to this in a way, because now we've stopped running, and it's really an opportunity to kind of think about how we're living our lives and what we want to do next. So take it.
Totally.
Keep my thing.
Mike, anything that you're working on at the moment that is either been a project that has been inspired by this situation, or that has kind of the approach has come about as a result of the way that things have changed across this period?
Look, I think where we're seeing it most profoundly in some of the projects we're entertaining as our next sort of phase of development, things will come out of this with, are kind of sitting in two veins. One, they're either opportunistic, you know, you're looking at projects that can get up really quickly. How can we take advantage of being the first country that's back up and running? So there's a producer hat you put on and think, how can we be nimble and pivot and so on? But there's a big other part of me that's looking at projects we're doing and thinking, what's the bigger emotional place we can go to? I think the thing people, well, we might say things like a musical or escapist might be great after this, or there's certain kinds of emotional experiences. I also think the other thing that's going on right now is an awful lot of navel gazing, and yet that very often makes for good drama or good television. So the things I'm trying to see in the projects or the writers that I'm working with is, how do we go large? How do we think beyond, use what we're experiencing right now, but actually elevate it, whether that's elevating with genre or taking it to another place, or think about the bigger emotional truth that is. And that might seem slightly grandiose, but every pitch I'm getting at the moment, or every idea we're looking at to develop, and then thinking about the creative team we'd put behind that as a writer's room, it's really thinking about, where can this story take us emotionally that's somewhere bigger than just ourselves, that's bigger than our lounge rooms or bigger than the last person I had a conversation with. Because I think there's something, I think that's true for stories always, but I think that's really true when you fall into a hole, you've got to think about the world outside the hole. So I think encouraging writers to get writing now and be dynamic is one thing. Being mentally health aware to think, maybe I'm just not up for that right now, is also very equally true. So we're in a phase where my inclination, what I'm saying to writers is, think about short documents, think about outlines and pitch documents. Don't feel like you've got to commit to writing that epic feature or 10-episode drama. What can you do that just puts a page together of an idea, and then allow yourself to kind of drill that idea to see where it could go, bigger than your lounge room, bigger than your own headspace. That's what I'm sort of encouraging the writers working with now, and it's where my own headspace is at with the ideas in front of us.
And with those writers that you're working with at the moment, are you guys doing the remote writers room thing? Are you using things like Zoom?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a project that's due to go into production as soon as we can. In fact, we've got two of them. Both of them are in the sort of final stages of their writing phase. That writer's room began in the real world, and then, like Alice was saying, transitioned to a virtual space. But we're really making the most of that very, very well. Our story producers and our team, and in our general development of the whole slate. And there's some really good tools. We've discovered a tool called Millernote, which is Australian made apparently. It's essentially a virtual whiteboard. And that works really well to have a shared space where everyone can scribble on at the same time, and it's very visual. I find when we get into a sort of COVID headspace, we tend to close down. We're thinking in words and spaces. And I'm with you. I think it was Chelsea talking about cutting stuff up, or maybe Jackie cutting stuff up and making coloured pictures everywhere. I'm all for visual laying out. So we found Millernote as a virtual whiteboard you can share amongst the team and work in that cycle. So you can have it live when you're working on it, in a room, much like we're doing now, and we can all scribble on it, we can all see it, but then it becomes a document we can all take away and add to, comment on, bring back, and that's our starting point to isolate things out. And it's got images on it, it's got video clips on it, and it's working in a visual way. So just as a tool, we're finding that incredibly useful.
Jackie, obviously a bunch of the work that you do is in the area of comedy. And you guys were talking about the difference of, not being in the same physical space, yourself and Madeline, talking about this. And I know, from working on comedy stuff, there's a certain energy that happens where somebody throws a gag up and somebody else runs with it and they bounce it. How do you think, has this affected the kind of comedic energy for you, Jackie? What do you think?
It has actually. Like when I need a bit of a lift, like I will just incessantly start FaceTiming Madeline just to pray that she'll answer that, so we can just banter, just so we can have this long, while our kids are wanting stuff from us, but just to make jokes, just to get the banter back, which we so normally do together. But I've found that really good, just to pick up the phone or call, WhatsApp or whatever, or just even messaging, just to have some jokes. Because I just rely on banter so much as that fuel, and then I can get back to the writing. And so I've just found keeping up the humor inside the house, and to try and have fun with the kids, and make some jokes with my husband, and trying to keep that alive as well. Otherwise it's pretty hard to write comedy, I find. But another thing, I just want to pivot. I really wanted to use that word. I was quite impressed with Chelsea's introduction of that word today. Thank you, Chelsea. But also I found this time really good for mentoring as well. I put my hand up to do some mentorship. So I've been doing a bit of mentoring, and I'd really suggest to any writers out there, if there's someone, or through a guild, New Zealand, and I'm sure Australia's got so many different guilds that have these money for mentorship. So, to get in touch and and say, I've always wanted to be mentored by this person. Maybe it can just be one phone call or like one Zoom meeting. And that's been quite a fun thing. And the Film Commission has just given Madeline and I the responsibility of handing out $50,000 to 5 emerging female writers. I think they're announcing it tomorrow, but I think I'm allowed to say that. I've already said it, so it's too late. So yeah, so Madeline and I are just about to, start taking applications from female writers. And I think it's so great just because we want to connect with those women as well, and kind of just people that, and we've chosen to kind of put a call out to people who feel like they just need a bit of a boost, people that haven't had that much that much support, or people that are, like Chelsea was saying, maybe a little bit, as women can be a little bit backwards and coming forwards, a little bit nervous about sending a document, or so that's an exciting thing to have been doing as well, during this lockdown.
Are you really hard on yourself? Is that thing of that nervousness to send a document? Like, I find that tricky sometimes, of never knowing when something's ready to share with other people. How do you personally deal with that sense of when something's ready to send, or when to stop over perfecting it to the point of like looping in an agency, a screen body, a writer you love, a producer? Yeah, how do you personally deal with that?
Oh, personally, I guess because I feel like I've been doing it for so long, like I now just think if I've got, because for me, all of the wealth is in the idea. So if I feel like I've got an original idea or just a kernel, I can sometimes just like get to 3 lines and go, this is gold, like, unless somebody else has done it, so I don't, so I've kind of got a bit looser on that. Just like if I've got a good idea or a good kernel, that's when I'll share it. And then of course I'll say, look, I'll give you some more pages, so there's something to talk about. But, and also when I read other people's, like if I'm mentoring, I read other people's, or submissions are coming into me, I'm just always looking for just the idea. And I don't care if people like know how to write or whatever. It's just if they got a good original idea and a good take on it. And that's the exciting thing, to identify and find those fresh ideas and those original voices, regardless of how poetic, the prose is and all of that. Now as I'm a bit older and a bit like, I don't really care about that stuff, because they can just employ someone to write it up real nice,
Interesting, like kind of marrying what you're saying with what Trent was saying too before about the, what you're saying is just the importance of distilling an idea and just finding what really is at its core and being able to communicate that really efficiently. Maybe one of the things that more than ever, because there's these executives taking all these Zoom calls and doing like all these pitches back to back to back to back, maybe the expectation, or like maybe it would benefit us as creatives to take the opportunity to refine, like to work on that ability to make stuff sell in less words and just be really kind of like clear and concise, because maybe now more than ever with what's going on in the world, with the general fatigue that, I don't know about you guys, I haven't been sleeping great. It's a bit harder to sleep these days. Lots of crazy dreams and lots of stuff going on. But, with all that general fatigue people are feeling, plus having to do 28 Zoom calls back to back to back, the better you get at just kind of putting something in a sentence or two is probably going to really help you in this.
Yeah. I think for me, I get so excited when I'm working with other people or looking at other people's ideas as well as pitching my own, is there an interesting idea, and does the particular person or group of people, but usually the key creative person, have an interesting brain so that they will tell that idea in their own particular way. It's like, trying to identify those people with those really interesting brains that take a good idea and are able to express it in a very unique way. I find that quite magical, finding those people and trying to collaborate with them, constantly calling them to call me back, just call me back. Yeah.
Have you got and for people who are a bit on the shy side and find it hard to put themselves out there for that, because I'm the same way. I'll call someone over and over and over and over. Sorry if I'm being a dickhead. Sorry, blah blah blah. I know I'm probably what's going on. Like for people who are a bit more shy about putting themselves out there, what would be your tip for them in that sense?
I would say find a really good friend, someone that they feel very comfortable with, and team up with them and have that person be like their kind of agent or manager or producer, even if they've got no experience. I'm talking about for emerging people, people that, not pitching to Universal or something, but, like team up with someone who feels confident and who can just make that phone call for you and go, look, the person, my writing partner, they could call you. My writing partner has an amazing idea. I'd love to hook up a phone call. She's, you know, got a very interesting idea and a unique voice. I don't know, just teaming up with a good friend and going, can you just make the first phone call, or do an email intro, or just be like, pretend to be my manager, or just making it kind of fun. And then just kind of, I think with two of you as well, I find this working with Madeline so much. It's just like everything's just a bit more lighthearted. You can just, if it goes terribly, you can just laugh about it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I think it's always like, you know, for people who are real solo writers, it's always been quite a challenge because it's all on you. You know, it's like being the tennis player versus being the person who's part of a footy team. You know, like you feel very much it's all on you. And I'm sure there's a lot of people feeling quite lonely in their creative process particularly throughout this period where you are so alone on so many levels of life. But, you know, maybe now is a better time than ever to reach out to other people and connect with other people and collaborate and find ways to broaden your world through your laptop screen, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, the last thing I'd probably add is what I find really good as well is, especially like you're speaking, you know, talking about if you are a solo writer just sitting in your room freaking out with your one idea, like it is great just to kind of jam 7 ideas, like just so everything becomes just a little bit more, not dilute, because they all should be very special ideas, but a bit more lighthearted. So like, you know, this one could take off, but yeah, I don't know, just to kind of be a bit more easy with it. And really remembering to separate, you know, that your ideas are out there and you're here. I remember being taught that by a mentor of mine. And it's, if they hate my idea, they don't hate me. They just think my idea is really dumb, but they don't think I'm dumb, you know. And that's really, I think, such an important thing to kind of differentiate. Yeah.
And it is hard to get your head around because on one level you do pour a lot more of yourself into your writing than like when I was a landscaper, there wasn't a whole lot of me in the driveways I paved. You know, like I pave a driveway, but it's not like, doesn't have what I would consider to be my emotional core paved within it. And so that, you know, that can be a tricky thing, I guess. But you're very right. Like it's being able to come to that balance where you understand that the feedback is everybody involved, particularly in I know Australia and New Zealand, I think we have a very supportive industry where everybody, if they're giving you feedback on a project, genuinely just wants to make that project as great as they can. And they, you know, overwhelmingly want to support each other and help each other. So
everyone wants it to work. A great thing I've been doing is I've been paying my kids, because there's not really much chance for them to go and earn money. They're just, you know, 12, 11, my 11 and 12-year-old. I've been paying them to read my treatments, and I pay them $10 to read it and give me feedback. And they are so brutal, which I love. They're like, dumb idea, never should be made. Don't waste anybody's time. Don't waste their money. I'm like, great. And then I pay them the $10 and they go upstairs again. It's amazing.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Mine are 3 and 5, so I don't want their feedback yet. Not be helpful. They'll just tell you whatever I'm working on. Trent, in terms of comedy, you know, you're working with some of the biggest comedians in the world, some of the biggest comedy creators in the world. What's going to be comedy writers' role through this and through the back end of this? What do you think that the creators of comedy, what kind of role do we have coming out of this and through this process? I'd just be curious what you think about that. Because I'm often of two minds. Is it, you know, how much do we lean into this thing? How much do we lighten people out of it? What do you think, Trent?
Thanks, Christian. I can't hear you 100% well at the moment, but thank you for saying I'm working with big. I think to me it feels like it's for comedy, and like if you're asking specifically like what we're going through now, it feels like it's kind of like there's going to, not diminishing returns, but it will be like eliminating like the first ideas a little bit. I feel like you know, we were faced with that sort of question when we were writing this season, going, well, it feels like, you know, the pandemic will exist in the world of shows that have nothing to do with it. It's going to be like, you know, the way like 9/11 generally exists in worlds, even if it's not about that. So we're sort of like questioning whether like how much do we want to play with it? How much do we want to like, you know, parody it, even, for want of a better word. But I think ultimately, you know, if it's smart and clever and you know that it works, it just does work, and you feel like you're on safe ground when a joke is good or a bit is good. And if it's not, it's kind of not. But yeah, I think, you know, it's still, the temperature's still a little hard to read here anyway at the moment.
Yeah, fair. I guess, you know, the numbers from America are pretty astounding, and it's probably going to be I imagine the energy over there is probably slightly different to here, where the energy is, people are a little bit like, oh, we can maybe go to the beach again now. And I think over there it's still ice rinks full of bodies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess so. It's like, well, it's still definitely, we're still in it a lot more. But there's still, you know, there's funny ridiculousness in the management of it, even particularly like at the highest level here. Like, that's still, a lot of that is inherently funny. Like, you watch press conferences, Trump press conferences, you can't, they're funny. Like, that's a comedy bit built around this pandemic. Like, he's probably creating the first really good material out of it.
Great. And on that note, does anybody else have anything they'd like to add or leave people with today? Because we've reached our hour, and I'm cautious of going over. Has anybody got any little things they'd like to leave anyone with before I wrap it up?
Oh.
You've appeared, Alice. You've appeared.
I appeared. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh no, is it on me? Oh, the takeaway. Oh my God. just hang in there. Yeah.
Hey, that's what I was going to say.
Were you going to say it? See,
Yeah.
we're all the same. We're connected. We're saying the same thing. Yeah.
Hang in there and do less. My takeaway was like, the balance is actually quite nice. Like, not commuting and going to places. I almost feel not guilty about it, but that idea that I think I'll look back on this with real fondness, this period of like.
Yeah. I think just no one wants to admit it, that we're no one wants to admit it, that we're kind of enjoying the pandemic a little
Writers
bit.
were built for this. This is our shtick.
Yeah, that's true. We haven't really spoken about that. How much
truth's come out.
Don't rush to McDonald's.
Yeah.
And don't drink disinfectant. It doesn't work. I tried.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank you guys for all joining us. Thank you. Collaboration and creativity were the things that we kind of came together today to talk about. With that in mind, I would like to acknowledge the First Nations people of the lands where I live and work and where I am based. I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging as traditional owners and custodians of the land. Today, I'm coming to you guys from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation. While many people here from the panel and in the audience will have come together from the confines of their individual homes, from the many nations of Australia as well as overseas. And I'd also like to pay my respects to the First Nations people of all those nations before we leave. Sorry, I did want to do that at the start, but I was just a little bit nervous and I dived straight into asking people questions. Nice note to end it all in. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Christiaan.
Beautiful.
Thanks,
Christiaan.
everyone.
Christiaan.
Bye, everyone.
Hang in there.
Cheers, guys.
Hang in there.